Hello and welcome to the August 23rd meeting of the Finance and Legal Guild of the Lifeboat Academy. And as is our custom, we start in a good way by grounding ourselves in the land, acknowledging the land. And in doing so, we are acknowledging our understanding, our recognition that we are enmeshed in an interdependent web of all being, that through the land we receive everything that we need that sustains us, and that everything that we have and are ultimately returns to the land. And in acknowledging this connection, we acknowledge the deep wisdom of indigenous cultures around the world that have realized this understanding and have preserved this understanding and shared this understanding with us who all of us here who come from cultures that seem to have forgotten this along the way, have lost our connection to the land and to each other and to all of our relations. And so by acknowledging the land, we also acknowledge a deep debt of gratitude to all of the indigenous cultures of the world who not only have retained and shared this, but have done so in the face of tremendous opposition and outright aggression to try to remove this understanding, to destroy this understanding. And so we also acknowledge an obligation of care and reconciliation to repair the harms that have happened, both to the natural world and to our neighbors in the world, who have been on the receiving end of well, genocide. And so in acknowledging that, we also hopefully engender gratitude to the land and to the relation, all of our relations, human and more than human, and a commitment to living in right relation with each other. And I invite us all just to take a moment to ground ourselves before we get into the meeting, and to take a deep breath in, breathing in the freshness and energy of the air entering your lungs. And as you exhale, feeling the weight of your body just relaxing into the seat that supports you, and knowing ultimately that you are hugged to the earth by gravity. And that as you breathe in and breathe out, you are engaging in a reciprocal relationship, taking in air and oxygen created by all of our green relations, breathing out carbon dioxide that they then can use. And that this is just one of many ways in which we are deeply connected to each other and to the world around us. And so one more deep breath in, feeling that energy coming in. And as you exhale, just let go of anything that doesn't serve you here and now, letting go of anything that keeps you from being present in the meeting today. So with that, let's do a quick check-in round. How's everybody doing? I am inspired to use our classic "What's the weather like with you?" both internal and external. And the circle as I see it is Becca, Heather, Valon, and me. So Becca, over to you. What's the weather like with you today?
Um, kind of fluttery, inconsistent wind. Um, and That's can be very pleasant, but also uncentering. Um, and The actual weather is kind of sunny, but not too hot here, so that's nice. And I got to the pool for a swim on one of the last days it was open, the outdoor pool. So that was nice. Over to Heather.
Yeah, the weather out here in the big picture window I have that I can look outside is pouring rain. So and the weather inside of me is cozy. Inside, yeah. I realize that the weather is not going to stay this way, or so I'm told. Outside, we've postponed a big picnic event from Saturday to Sunday with the expectation it's going to clear up. Okay. Yeah, over to Roland.
My internal weather and external weather match in that it feels like the right kind of day to have a meeting indoors, which is I often feel really torn about having a meeting indoors when I could be outdoors doing other stuff. So today is perfectly aligned, and it's also the kind of day where, I could do with having a few of what's in the bottles behind Heather during the day. So over to Ben.
Well, and today is the kind of day that I'm having an extra coffee, and it is unseasonable. So yeah, we're having rain and it's so foggy I can't even see out to the field. It's we can basically see to the shed and not beyond it. And uh and internally, let's see. Well, actually, I think I'm choosing to take, like Roland said, I'm choosing to take this as a sign that it's a good day to sort of hibernate a little bit. And I feel like I have had a lot of information coming at me recently, probably for the last 2, 3 weeks. I just feel like I've been bombarded with just information coming from all angles. And none of it's bad information. It's just there's so much of it. I think I need some uh, I need to kind of huddle away from any new information long enough that some of the dust can settle. So now that we've had a chance to check in, let's also check in on what are your goals for our time together today? What is on the agenda for you? And I will bring up, oops, that's the wrong button. I will share the screen with what we have on the agenda already, and then we can add to that. So one of the things we have outstanding is the email to the lawyers. We've got a draft and some revisions. And so it's talking about that email and talking about what the next steps are now that we have that. And we have also a sort of a general, it's that time we're at our seasonal review for all the guilds. So checking in with guild members and seeing where people are at. We just have that kind of as a placeholder. And I guess the last item is the fall semester is coming together for the Lifeboat Academy. And so I think sharing an update with finance and legal, and then seeing whether or not that has any impact on what we're doing together as a guild. So those are the things that are already on the list. And is there anything that you want to add? Over to you, Becca.
I'm planning to come visit.
Yay!
Actually have bought a plane ticket to Seattle.
Whoa.
And, I don't know if that really relates to this guild, except that if there's business of this guild that I could do in person while I'm there, like meet Heather in
Well,
person and meet Steph and Joey, and I don't know. We could just keep that in mind when we're thinking about
Mhm.
the fall plans.
Do you
Not,
But
have
not a
do
very
you,
long visit.
do you have dates yet?
yeah.
Yeah, it's I thought I emailed you guys yesterday, but the 26th, September 26th, I think I'd be arriving, and which is a Thursday. Wait, let me get my actual spreadsheet open. Mm. Yeah, my spreadsheet, my computer crashed, so I don't know where my spreadsheet is.
Yeah.
But my plane, I arrived in Seattle on September 25th, and then I think it's September 26th that I would be coming to Pender, and then, which is a Thursday, and then leaving on Saturday the 28th. So not a lot of time, but I have lots of other people I'm trying to see out there.
Mhm. You said to the 28th.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, over to Heather.
Oh, nothing to add to the agenda. I've got a lot of things on my mind that I won't sneak into this meeting unless they become obvious and connected. And I'm off to Italy on the 24th of September to the 1st of October to Terra Madre for slow food. So unfortunately, I was thinking that maybe I could meet up with you, Becca, but no, it's not going to work out.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Over to Roland.
Um, well, there's the email from Ben with a number of things in it that I don't think they all fit in the categories that we already have, and there's stuff in there that I'd like to talk about, and I'm not sure if it is timely to talk about it now or another time, but yeah. So I kind of feel like there's some timely stuff to talk about in that email.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you were able to see my initial response that I wrote back about it. So that is that's something else that I'd like to at least suggest for the agenda. Over to Ben.
Cool. Well, and I think I think that the first couple of things should be relatively quick. And so I was thinking today's going to be a light meeting. I mean, I could be very wrong about that. But let's just see what we can get through, and then I think we can do a little, sort of popcorn things on. It sounds like there's a bunch of different things that might be relevant to share, and then we can see where those things go. So with that in mind, let's pop into the email from the lawyers. I drafted something, and then Becca made some really good revisions. And so this is where we stand with the email at the moment. And so everyone should have had an opportunity to take a look at it. I think that Becca didn't really affect the content in any significant way. It was just sort of reorganizing it so that it flows better. And I think that's, yeah. So I guess we can do it like that. So I guess just general thoughts on where. Let's start with one round just on thoughts on the current draft as it is. Over to you, Becca.
Well, I'm just looking at your draft. So it looks like, did you just accept all of my
Yeah, yeah, I thought they
changes?
all made sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's good to go. and how, does the link now go someplace?
I haven't updated that, so but I think that's before sending it, I think that'll be a really quick housekeeping kind of thing, just to make sure that the link goes to the one, focuses in on the one thing.
Over to Heather.
Yeah, I like it. One of those sneaky things that I will just inject is that I had a long talk with Brandy last night with our Eco Village on the phone, and it looks like Van City is calling their mortgage.
Mhm.
And I just want to put that off to the side, is that I'd like some counsel on how to approach it. As those of us who know Brandy know that she is totally brilliant, totally reasonable, and yet somehow things don't always ring true. So anyway, that's just something I'd like to hang up there for another time. But what it does say, because they are a community service cooperative, is that there is more to it than the structure. And what's really super important is that relationship we have with each other, the clarity we have, the alignment we have, all of the things that make relationships work. I mean, here's an example of something which looks from externally from incredible project, incredible history, and yet it's falling apart.
Mhm.
Oh, you, Roland.
Yeah, I think I have no changes except for a few grammar edits to do, which I think are probably just there because it's still being in the writing stage, but I don't have anything that I'd like to add to that. Well, the one thought, not to the email itself. I think the email is fine, and I think that it's ready to go. And this actually ties into the email update that Ben sent and what's going on, what Brad Smith's organization is doing. So it's not specifically about this email, but it relates to our efforts. And yeah, I would be interested in being part of the conversation about our eco village. I have some initial thoughts that I'd like to share about that. So over to, whenever that's appropriate, over to Ben.
All right. Well, I think that's gonna, so I'll do the update on the Brad Smith thing because I think it can be really quick. Basically, I just have a couple emails back and forth with Brad. I just checked in with him to see how things were going. Things are going really well with their project at this moment. It's also still early days. So one of the questions I have for Brad is, I don't know if you had a chance to look at their website. It isn't very deep, what they present on their website, but in concept, they're talking about all of the same things that we're talking about. So basically, sweat equity options, that it would be a land trust where people would have an equity stake in the land trust. And so I don't have any details though on what that looks like in terms of legal structure. But there's a lot of there's alignment in terms of how they're talking about it. And my next question for Brad is, what does that look like legally? And of course, they're focused in the US, so I don't know how that would translate, but that might actually influence what we want to do, because it seems like there could be some parallels there. And it is interesting how bringing up our eco village, how Well, and the other thing too, the other part, so I guess I sent two different emails. One was a follow-up on my thoughts after the Foodlands strat plan last week.
Yeah.
And the connection with Abundance Farm, and the really quick story on Abundance is right now Amir is the sole owner, and is had been willing to just basically what do you call it, put in his will that the farm would transfer, the legal ownership of the farm would transfer to a community, like a land trust. But now he has a new family, and so he's sort of rethinking how, you know, what his responsibilities to his family are in terms of, you know, the gift of the property. And likewise, they have been revenue negative all along. And not only is Amir the only owner, he is also the one who tops up all of the accounts to keep them viable. And they've got an amazing operation. They've got around 100 CSA members, mostly in Vancouver. It's a really cool system. And so in terms of like, they have engagement, they have a real community built around it where people are actively engaged, they're producing food, and they're not financially viable, you know, in a sustainable way. So I think it's a very similar in a way to our eco village, where on one level it's very, very successful, but it's not financially viable. So anyhow, I think that's really it's sort of the two main updates that are relevant to the legal question. So I think actually I think that we can just go into the next point, which is I think we can read outreach for feedback on legal structure as next steps. So yeah, Heather, oh, sorry, Becca.
Before we completely turn away from the email to the lawyers, can we just come up with like what exactly the next steps are on that? So Roland has some grammatical changes and you need to fix a link, and then you're gonna send it to the lawyers. And by when? And I think it might be good to include some dates, like that if they say we need to meet, here's what like tell them what our meeting schedule is or something. I don't know. Just to like not have this go into a black hole of waiting to hear from them indefinitely, to give them some kind of requested timeline or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of barely following the stuff about abundance and our eco village, since I don't know any of that, but that's okay. I don't think I need to totally understand it. Okay, so and then did you call on me in the circle, or just because I raised my hand?
But well, I called on you because you raised your hand, but you also were next in circle, and I think that what you said was perfectly appropriate as
Okay.
next in circle. So I think we can just keep going.
Good.
So yeah, and I think at this point, we're in kind of gathering considerations mode in terms of next steps. We have had, you can see the 3 bullet points above around, once we had some idea about the legal structure, we were going to kind of shop it around. And so we talked about scheduling meetings and making sure that we have sort of a short pitch about it, and what are the questions for feedback that we'd be interested in. So that's where we are now, and we have Becca has suggested some specific next steps on the email, and then over to Heather in terms of any thoughts on where do we go from here now that we're engaged, now that we think we have an email to the lawyers and the next step with the lawyers. What else do we need to think about? Over to you, Heather.
Well, I don't know if we're ready to, when you say shop it around, I guess the next step is to identify who, in what order do we want to approach people with this proposal. I'm not sure that I know what you think the best approach is. So to Roland.
I was actually thinking along the same lines. Who do we want to shop it around to? And then there's also sequencing. Do we shop it around now? Do we shop it around after we meet with the lawyers again? Uh, I feel like for myself, I feel like meeting with Bill and Elliot before shopping it around might be a good idea. And I am also acknowledging that I have a tendency of wanting to overconsult. So take that into consideration for that recommendation or suggestion or preference. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I was thinking the same things in having a more specific list of who we want to talk to. And I think when we get specific, it might make more sense. I think when we're specific about who we're talking to, that might help us understand the sequencing. And in particular, I'm thinking Brad Smith is somebody that I would like to talk this through with. And I think we can do that right away. I don't think that we need it more settled with the lawyers, because actually what Brad shares may influence what we talk about with the lawyers. You know, if Brad has like, if they've actually gotten to the point where they say, here's the legal model that we're working with, then that would actually be something really, and we like it. It could be something that where we say, when we talk to Bill and Elliot, we're just like, here's what they're doing in Oregon. Can we do that here in BC? Or how do we link with it? So I think Brad Smith would be on my list of early consultation. Because he's not going to be an investor, right? So he's not going to have the same sort of desire for a level of detail. So anyhow, I'll put Brad on the list, and with a sequencing ASAP. And back over to Becca.
Can you remind me what the project is that Brad Smith is
Yeah,
doing?
Brad Smith is Resilient Communities, and he has, I think, a dozen landowners, mostly in Oregon and Washington State, I think. And they're landowners who want to start resilient communities. And he's trying to figure out how to bring them together so that there's economies of scale kind of thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we decided at our last meeting, and which is why I suggested the revisions to the letter to the lawyer that I did, was that we wanted to just touch base with them briefly to make sure they thought this was a general reasonable approach before we shop it around. And that could just be an email, like them saying, yeah, that sounds great, let's start working on making it happen. Or it could be like, well, but what about this and this and this, in which case we would then need to meet with them before we talk to Joey and other potential investors. And we probably, even if it's, yeah, this sounds great, we probably need some wording that we are comfortable with and that the lawyers are comfortable with, or I don't know if we need to have the lawyers review the wording. But so I could easily see it going towards meeting with them first, but there's a possibility that I think we last week or last meeting were saying maybe we don't need to meet with them before we talk to some people. And so certainly I don't think we need to talk to them before we talk to Brad Smith. Over to Heather.
Yeah, it sounds to me like we can just talk to Brad Smith as soon as you can get an audience with him or a meeting with him. And I always really like to have, instead of going things sequentially and waiting for this to happen before that can happen and before that can happen, it's like set up the meetings and let the chips fall the way they will, is kind of like, for me, sometimes that means we can get the action rolling or the dynamics rolling in a better way. And I don't know, that's just an energetic thing, whatever's. Find out when Brad can meet, find out when the lawyers can meet. If the lawyers can meet before him, then that, if he can meet before, then, just go with it. Let's just get it rolling. He might have some suggestions on who else we could meet with too, or some wisdom on how he approached it. Over to you, Roland.
That is all very interesting. And it just makes me think the way that we're talking about different groups and different people. I think the last comment that I made in the response to Ben's email, to the group email, is about relationships between organizations. And this, I don't want to start talking about it at this point. I don't, unless anyway, it doesn't feel like it's appropriate. But it's making me think about, there's energy and effort going in one quadrant over here, and in another quadrant with us, and then in another quadrant over there. And how are there ways in which we can actually start to, because that's part of the lifeboat model and idea, that it isn't the Lifeboat Academy doing everything, but it is that we're all in lifeboats, and we can all work together to help each other. In helping each other, we all benefit from the efforts of all, kind of thing. So so I'm very curious about how the group feels about relationships between organizations like the Resilient Communities and Our Eco Village and BC Foodlands, and the way that we're working together. So back to Ben.
We were just talking, Roland and I were talking this morning about remembering, and it's a theme that came up in Foodlands. And it came up around, I don't want to make this overly complicated, but one of the things I've noticed is that when we talk about the Lifeboat Academy or any kind of learning, a lot of people think this is additive. We need to learn more and more and more. And somehow at some point we will know enough that we can then figure things out. As opposed to, there's an element in this that is not about learning anything new, but is remembering something that we already know. And and I think especially in terms of how we work together. And then the other thing that Roland and I were talking about today is, remembering is taking members and putting them back together, as opposed to deconstructing or, being analytical and separating. Remembering is about sort of figuring out how to put the members, to reconnect the members. And that's what I'm thinking about, right? It feels to me very much like I learned the particularities of how caterpillars turn into butterflies. And one of the amazing features is that as the butterfly is developing, the thorax and the antennae and the wings all develop separately in the goo and then attach themselves. So they actually start, there's a thing called imaginal cells, within the caterpillar. And each imaginal cell is basically has sort of a knowledge of one part of the butterfly that starts to develop on its own before the butterfly then puts the wings on the thorax and the antenna on the head, kind of thing. And I feel like that it feels to me like that's happening now, where it's, Foodlands with its focus, Resilient Communities with its focus, Lifeboat Academy with its focus, and we all have a role to play, and they're all different roles. And and I think and then this makes me think of, Heather, what you were saying. In some sense, I don't know that we can sequence it. I don't know that actually, maybe it's not worth our time to figure out what the ultimate sequence is. It's really just about sort of figuring out, how do we start to connect the dots? How do we start to bring who might be potential allies together? Well, and then, so just to be specific about it, I'm going to list a couple potential partners. We've already talked about Resilient Communities. There's Foodlands in general, but then there's also the network circle in Foodlands. And do they have some role in this? And the potential role that I'm seeing, one of the things that was interesting to me about talking to Amir at Foodlands is, how many community farms out there. Well, and actually, Heather, what you were saying about our eco village, like, how common is this out there? And is there a way of using the model? I'm not even gonna say, I don't want to, that sounds too sort of purposeful. Where is there the common interest in so the network circle has a plan to start to reach out to all of the members of Foodlands and potential members. And in that, talking to people about, what are your challenges and what are you bringing to the table, basically? And how does that factor into what we're talking about here? And I think I'll leave it at that, because I've been talking too long. And over to you, Becca.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in this idea of relationships among different organizations. And before you started talking about the caterpillar and the imaginal cells, which is probably a better metaphor, I was thinking about the metaphor of a supersaturated solution, that when one crystal forms, all of a sudden you get a bunch of precipitate or something, like that there's maybe the potential to catalyze, like, if it sounded like in your notes that people were saying, yeah, the financial unsustainability of this is so deep that it's not even talked about, or something. I don't know if I understood that part of the note, but that if we could, I don't know that the legal structure is the crystal or the catalyst necessarily, but if we come up with an investment vehicle and structure that isn't just about this one property, but is something that could be, that the multi-stakeholder cooperative could quickly morph, if it was appropriate, into an umbrella for a bunch of groups, and financial resources could be shared. I don't know. It might just be there's a danger of being both overly optimistic and also overly what's the word, imperialistic, like, oh, come join our thing, but but I think the remaining open to those possibilities is what I want to give voice to, the in a non-imperialistic way. Heather.
Whoa, there's so many things that are whirling around for me that I can't just, grab a hold of them. It's like a balloon going up. Yeah, let's just put out my immediate response is in particularly to listening to Brandy and our eco village and how grandiose and and part of me just wants to tie it down and say, make it work for you, Brandy. This isn't about making it work for the whole of Canada or bringing it down to BC. This is about you on your farm and the relationships you have developed or not, and the people who are disenfranchised and whatever. It's about, like, I think that Van City wants to see that you have a business plan that's going to pay for your mortgage. And yet at the same time, what I know is that the kind of research and the kind of big picture, context that she's working in is what we all think is important. So I don't call it a balance, but I think it's both, like you would say, and plus, and we need to make it both work. And where do we put our focus? At what point do we put our focus? I think for us here is we put our focus on getting this financing together, not on how we're going to be a model for everybody else and we need to set something else so that it can be replicated or whatever. I mean, people will learn from us if we're successful. And we can document like what we have done so we can share it. But like I kind of agree with you, Becca. It's like, I don't think it sounds imperialistic, and I don't think we are. But there is certainly a danger. And just as an add-on to that, I've been also kind of in conversations with young agrarians. And it seems to Sarah that they have overshot, and now they are into this multi kind of approach to it all across Canada. And part of her just wants to bring it right back to BC, make it smaller, make it more containable. They're going to lose their $1 million funding that they had. It's not going to be renewed. And, so like, to me, a lot of this is coming back to financial viability. And in Foodlands, we're facing that too. And it's kind of like, I'm thinking like, no, we need to be nimble, and we need to be a network that doesn't depend on grants after grants after grants, that this really kind of take us in different directions that we are probably important work to do, but not core. So this is just a huge issue for me. The financial piece of it, I think, is a huge issue for me. And against the financial piece is also the acknowledgement of the relationship stuff, which then you come back to all the time. And there's just a couple of relationships that I have some history with, 2 of them that I can think of that are in our network, and I'm a little insecure about those relationships. And because of my insecurity, I think they may have be working against me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas overwhelmingly, my relationships I've discovered over and over again, because I have trusting and affectionate and open relationships with people, that the support is there. So I know this is a bit rambling, but that's kind of, I'm just firing on all cylinders. I think that's good enough for now. Yeah. To you, Roland.
I just want to let you know I've got a little puppy, as you can see, who is spending a lot of time just wanting to cuddle with me. It's Zelda. And Apparently whipping me with her tail as she's looking at me. Anyway, and so first, where are we? Are
Yeah,
we
right.
are we are we are we closing? And I feel like I've started this, so I'm sorry if I've detracted things. I just wanted to like, can we close in terms of the email to the lawyer? And I wanted to say I agree that we have to make it work for us, and that I feel like that's part of our North Star, that we are acting as the experiment to make something work. And if we can make something work, then it becomes something that can be useful for replication. The goal isn't first replication and then doing it. So I completely agree. And the way that we make it something that is replicable is by making it work for us. So I just wanted to say I completely agree with, we have to make it work for us, and that may be mean that we need to remember to keep bringing things back to us instead of, I know I have a tendency of wanting to be overly expansive and, we'll save the universe, kind of thinking. So where are we? Can we come back to the agenda and put things in place so that we can have full discussions around the different topics that we want to talk about? Over to Ben.
We are totally from my perspective, we are totally on track on the agenda and talking about exactly what we need to be talking about. And I need to take a quick bio break, and I'm going to pause the recording, and then I will be right back.
Zelda's not quite tall enough. You can just see her eyes. There she is.
I'm gonna take a bio break too.
So I hear that the Foodlands weekend was very successful.
Yeah, it was really stimulating.
Yeah.
And I call it a weekend too, even though it was during the week.
Oh,
Because
right.
I don't even know what to call it, because I hesitate, because yeah, it's always on a weekend, but in this case, it worked better for us not to be on a weekend,
Yeah.
to be kind of a working kind of day.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I think that, and I really appreciate, I mean, I'd say this with him here, but I really appreciate Ben's engagement with it. And I was just so thrilled to see the two of them, Amir and Ben, just locked in this kind of intense conversation, because I knew, kind of like as a matchmaker, that these two people would
mm,
be most aligned,
mm, mm,
and I think in Foodlands, that's part of my role, is when I go out and see all of these farms operating in many different ways, I can see the threads of how, they would learn from each other or connect to each other. So I'm really focused on that relationship building, networking.
mhm,
And
mhm. Yeah.
yeah, and and there's another, well, wait, Ben, I can say another thing I've been asked to come into, and that's Linnea Farm. Do you know Linnea Farm?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So
we did.
they're having deep trouble.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so Young Agrarians is going to contract me to basically work with them.
Okay.
And so I've got to call in to, let's have this conversation, Amy, about what's needed for Linnea. And
Mm,
what's interesting is, and I mean, Becca won't know this, but Linnea is one of our oldest community farms in BC.
Mhm.
mm,
Linnea started almost about the same time that we did at Fraser Common Farm, and there were connections in the early days. And now it's like some of them have aged out. They have been in a poverty cycle, which is kind of like the kind of thing we need to right from the get go. What happens when farmers or activists age out and they haven't provided for their future? and so here we are, and all of the leadership and the energy that was put into that, community when people were just at their prime, like, is not there anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's succession again. And
Mhm.
so we're just starting this project. So we're not thinking about succession. We're not thinking about when you guys are going to be 80 years old, right? And none of us have, and none of us did. And now I'm saying, hey, this has to be part of the forecasting. It's not just how can we do it right now, but how can we sustain it? And how do are the people sustained through that?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Anyway, you're
I mean,
back. So
yes.
I can
I'm-
stop talking.
Well, and I'm going to hit record in a second, but I am thinking about succession and I am thinking about sustainability, and that's going to be the context in which I start talking.
Can I just say one more thing quickly? And
Sure, go recording.
this has come up, particularly when, I've been talking to other co-op developers, has come up, is that, I think I've lost my thought now. It was such an important one. Um, well, it's in terms of succession and sustainability, yeah, it'll come back to me. Sorry.
No worries. Well, and that's actually what I was going to say in response to what Roland was saying is, and I am really happy that I have developed a very fundamental trust in the circle process. And as part of the both and, um, my take on it is thinking about how we connect to the other projects is in fact how we fund this. Because for example, one of the things that came up in just in the email exchange with Brad is one of their realizations right now is that they're going to have to locate hundreds or thousands of potential people who are interested in these, dozen or so resilient communities to be able to find the right number of people who can make it a go. And it's one of the things that we know from the Lifeboat Academy is there is a funnel. There are a lot of people who express some interest. Only some of them is there going to be, a fit for how it goes. And there's also a developmental process.
Yeah.
And so the idea of having a Lifeboat Academy, where there is a center that is really focused on identifying, vetting, and developing potential people to be involved in these communities only makes sense if we're not working just on this property, right? It doesn't make sense to have sort of a dedicated facility that is training up a bunch of people unless there are places for those people to go and a place for them to land. So for me, there's not an either or focusing on how do we finance this project versus how are we a part of this larger network. That larger network and our viability, our sustainability is completely interconnected. And so I don't think it's imperialism. I think it's really about connecting the dots and understanding the interdependent relationships between these things. Likewise, I think that one of the problems, like we're discussing a lot of community farms well, actually it's not just community farms, it's also co-housing projects. And, this is not an isolated problem where the what can seem kind of esoteric at the beginning. I think this is one of the challenges that we have is a lot of people come in, it's like, I just want to farm, I just want to find a spot. I just want to, can't we just do this? And the answer is, well, yeah, you can. And soon, if you don't have solid agreements, that's going to bite you in the butt. And if you don't have a conflict resolution process, that's going to be a problem. And even if you have a conflict resolution process, but you haven't developed and maintained trust and communication, your conflict resolution process can't work in isolation. And likewise, you can have a brilliant vision that gets a lot of people inspired, but if you don't have a business plan about how then do you pay for that? And if this is, kind of the comment that I was making about how the financial thing is so deep, a lot of people don't even recognize it, is it's all thought of as a current problem as opposed to a root problem of
Yeah.
thinking about what is the value you're creating? Who is that valuable to? Do they have the resources to sustain it? And I think, in terms of the finance and legal guild here, we are facing into a challenge that a lot of people don't, which is like the Joey thing. We need to talk to Joey and his friends who have the resources and have some interest and some alignment, and also come from a radically different worldview, where the assumptions that they make about how the world works is very different than the folks at, Abundance Farm. And so figuring out, and I think that there's often a tendency to say, they don't get it. We can't work with them, they don't get it, we're not aligned, as opposed to saying, oh, okay, how do we bridge that gap? How do we treat everyone as people, right? And we recognize there's gonna be some friction, there's gonna be some stepping on toes. And anyhow, so I think that's a very long-winded way of saying, I feel like this conversation is really at the core of what we're talking about. How do we take the time to knit together the relationships, even when because knitting, getting the wings of the butterfly to fit on the body, you can't expect the body to be the wings, or to even understand what the wings do or how they do. We just need to figure out what's that interface between the wings and the body and the head and the antennae, and how do we line those things up? So I don't think this is overly grand, and I do and both and bring it back to how do we make it work, right? How do we get the funding to secure this property, or figure out where we live, in terms of the Lifeboat Academy, if it has a function that serves all of these other organizations, or all of these other projects, then how do we navigate that sort of interconnection, interdependency in a way where it works for everyone? So anyhow, I feel like we're on track, and I also feel like in practical terms, we've got an email. I think Becca, one of the things we need to talk about before we go is Becca's idea of when could we meet with lawyers if they want to meet. We also know Brad Smith is an easy, let's meet with him. We also know we have an ongoing relationship with the Network Circle and Foodlands, and the Network Circle is going to meet, and that project's going to go forward. And so that we don't really have to do much, I think, about that. We just have to be aware that it's on the radar. And I think, likewise, what the Lifeboat Academy is doing in terms of the fall semester, that's moving forward on its own energy. So we just have to figure out where there might be some, connection points. Anyhow, I'm sorry if I went rambly. Over to you, Becca.
I had a sort of aha that something clicked for me that maybe has been in your mind all along, but when you were talking, but felt new to me, which was Lifeboat Academy not necessarily helping create from scratch a bunch of new entities, but being a link that helps the nodes in a network know each other and learn from each other and lift up. I don't know. I guess I knew all that, but there was some way that it made sense today. All the networking that you're doing kind of makes I just felt it like, oh yeah, that could actually, like, again, not to be grandiose or imperialistic, but like, what's the piece, the particular expertise that you guys bring that can help everyone be stronger um and yet if it doesn't work, if we can't make the finances work at Spalding Valley or someplace, I mean, there could still be that role, but it would be more credible and more helpful if we can figure out the financing piece, because that's a big place people are struggling.
Mhm. Mhm.
I guess when I was saying you guys, I was kind of thinking about the process consulting, but now I'm broadening it to like the other, Heather, your expertise, and in terms of the these land-based efforts, and Roland, you're, on the ground. Like that is, it can't be it wouldn't be credible without that on the ground um
Yeah.
experience also. And not to say that you each don't have all of those, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing, Becca. I believe that what Lifeboat has to offer is more on process. And what I have learned is the power of circle. I have to be really careful about not just going to circle, and if you're not doing circle, then you're not being effective, and and overselling and over promoting it. I think I over promoted to my own group sociocracy in the beginning because I thought it was just exactly what we needed, and other people didn't think that, and now the greatest resistance to sociocracy is my own group. So I'm not allowed to say the word on our farm, even though many people really really appreciate, and we're practicing it in many ways, right? So yeah, what comes to my mind is what was brought up quite often in our meetings at Abundance, and that is that we're doing this together. It's together we're doing this, and we all have a little bit of expertise and passion about some things, but some people have a little more than others. And so then the leadership, we take a look at the leadership for Lifeboat Academy. And in fact, that's how you're named, and it's appropriate. It's like helping us through. And it's not so much how to farm. I do not think it's how to farm, but you're experiencing and grounding and being in the earth and creating food security connects you to all the rest of us who are trying to have very place-based operations that do include, as the foundation of that is how we survive, and food is right up there, food and water and whatever. So, but what you bring to the network is your amazing facilitation skills, I think. And I'm starting to preach, I can tell. And and for me, what I'm bringing is the network I've already have, like 50 years of relationships with these people. And so, I mean, someone else might help me to do some of the financial stuff because I have background in finances too, but passing that on, sharing that, finding ways that we can engage other people who are going to learn the process. And the process is all of those things, like you say, Ben. and I like the way you say it, but just sometimes we need to focus on one piece a bit more than others, not at the exclusion, but at the immediacy. And boy, I don't want us to get into crisis. I am called upon all the time to look at a crisis, and I'm saying we can't work in crisis. Community doesn't move that quickly. And then saying this and then I guess the other thing I'm sometimes called upon, even by people who share the same values and are aligned, is to take a look at the kind of business plan as to all of a sudden we've got to have an ED and we've got to have somebody who's experienced in finances and we've got to have this business plan that all of a sudden Linnea is going to become this production center or something. Well, it's not going to happen that way. But if we don't have really solid processes, Ben, on how it could happen, how that community could begin to kind of turn itself around, financially and also in terms of support for the aging people who don't have anywhere to go, given they've given their life support, without financial compensation. I'm both challenged and also excited about this challenge.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping to work with you on it, Ben. And not only you, Ben, but I mean, in terms of Lifeboat. Because I'm looking at you, Roland, to get in the dirt there and make things grow and feed people and all of the wonderful things you do around food and how that's where your happy place is, and that's where your contribution is. It's fantastic. It's needed. Anyway, boy, I'm ever a talker today. I'm gonna pass it on to you, Roland.
I think that these are really great ahas. And things happen when they happen. And one of the things, so the analogy that I've long worked with, that I've been hoping for the Lifeboat Academy is, you know, uh, uh, in a community, you have to have different people with different skill sets to make a community work, to make a village work, to make a
Yeah.
household work. So while someone is cooking, they can't be plowing. So you need someone who can plow and someone who can cook, and you need someone who can, care for the children and the elderly, and all. You need different people with different skills. And I feel like and I think that is what the Lifeboat Academy has been working towards, not within itself, but trying to make links with other people and other organizations, either people who want to start, people who have started, or people who are established and want to connect with other people, other groups. And I feel like we've, in terms of myself as part of the Lifeboat Academy, I feel like we've started to do that successfully with through BC Foodlands with you, Heather, and it's one of the reasons why I would like to be able to make a stronger connection potentially with the Resilient Communities group. I'm trying to move away from calling it Brad Smith's and
Mhm.
and refer to the organization instead. Um, uh, that's why I was talking about, what are the specific things that each organization brings to each other. So I'm really excited, Heather, that you want to work with the Lifeboat Academy for what the Lifeboat Academy can bring to BC Foodlands, and maybe even by extension, for even further, through the network there, because that's where we start to increase diversity. And just, in terms of biomimicry, it's through diversity that a system becomes stronger. And what the Lifeboat Academy, I feel, is working on developing is how to keep um, communication systems healthy.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, use us, because and it becomes a mutual, and that's mutual aid. Um, so yeah. Um, and in terms of the our eco village, it was the thought that came to me, as you were describing it, Heather, that it was really strong, and then something has happened. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in the Lifeboat Academy, is how everything is iterative.
Mm.
It's changed because things are always changing. The decisions that you make now have an impact on the decisions that come, and how to develop a way of being able to work with that ever-changing environment. So I mean, it's just sort of like broadly that everything is iterative. Um, uh, but I feel that feels like it connects with situations such as what seems to be happening at our eco village. So yeah,
Mhm.
um, over to you, Ben.
I am so excited by this conversation. And I do feel, and this is um like Roland says, things happen when they happen, and the light bulbs go on, and the connections happen. And I think that, there is something really subversive in what we're talking about and what the Lifeboat Academy is promoting. And it's so subversive, people don't get it. And it's subversive because it's super simple. And it is, well, we were just talking this morning. I was thinking about the Lifeboat Academy, where you unlearn bad habits,
Mhm.
or it's a place of unlearning.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, I think what we're talking about is, or the other thing too, I was thinking, and Heather, one of the things I noticed at Foodlands is there is an unspoken, I think we can call out more clearly, circle process is not sociocracy. Sociocracy is not circle process. And the two only work if they are both in tandem with each other.
Mhm.
And I think that circle process gives people an experience of what it's like to collaborate across difference, what it's like to connect across difference, to hear, to connect the dots. And then sociocracy gives you a way of operationalizing that,
Yeah.
putting it into practice, making decisions, keeping on track. And but if you use it without, if you try to apply sociocracy, this has been my complaint all along with Sociocracy for All. And, I think Ted's doing great work, and I'm glad that he's out there really promoting it. And he seems to be getting a lot of people excited about it. But it's lost, I think, the flavor of circle process. That the life feel of the circle underneath it. And likewise, the way Sociocracy 3.0 says, you basically introduce it a little bit at a time. You start where there's some appetite, and you let people's positive experience um, get them hungry for more, as opposed to saying we're going to do sociocracy, like coming in and kind of doing the whole system. And
Mhm.
anyhow, I'm getting the point that I wanted to make is that all of these problems are not problems, they are opportunities, and that the reason that we get into a crisis point is because our general tendency is to push problems under the rug because they're uncomfortable, they're unpleasant, we don't like them. and or to plaster over them some rationalization where it's not really a problem, as opposed to just sort of facing into them and saying, yep, this is a challenge. We live in a capitalist economic system that does not compensate fairly for value. Yep. That's where we are, and we've got to work with that. And there are some people that have more resources than they know what to do with, and yet they're really stingy. And there are lots of people doing really good work, and they don't have the tools that they need to make it happen. How do we work with that? And there's something that opens up when you let go of this idea that we need more knowledge or the right solution or the right model or the right answer or whatever. And you just say, okay, how do we muddle through this? Like, how do we muddle through this together? What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? How do we make that work? Anyhow, I feel like it's time to wrap up, and this has felt incredibly useful to me, at least. So hopefully we're also on the same page. And I think that I'd like to propose we do a kind of a wrap-up round, last thoughts on this topic, and then we get specific on sending the email to Bill and Elliot's the next step. And do we want to have some proposed dates for when we can meet? And are there any other, final to-do items that we need to wrap up? So one round, last thoughts for the good of the cause. Becca, over to you.
Yeah, I think this is great. I'm working on making a colorful sun creature, something. And I mean, I think at least we can offer them our time at our meeting 2 weeks from now. And if we want to look at calendars to find other times, or maybe we should just say if that doesn't work for them. I mean, we're not even sure we need to meet, right?
Right.
So what I was thinking was we could say if it turns out we need to meet 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, just give them those times and to simplify things, unless we want to try to make it happen sooner. Over to Heather.
It seems like a good time to meet would be when you're in Pender. Just that thought, unless you wanted to meet earlier than that, because I'm just really, I'm really valuing in-person meetings, as I think that's certainly the takeaway that I had from the Abundance Farm. And that's what I'm suggesting that I do when I go to visit Linnea is let's make this in person. So I can't wrap it up. I think that there's so many things that are just there for follow-up. So that's my wrap-up, is that let's follow up on some of these things that have been mentioned and you've got recorded. To you, Roland.
Agreed. I totally agree. We've had a lot of big thoughts, and I'm excited about them, and I'm also left with so what? We've had these big thoughts, we've had ahas. What do we do with them now? It feels like this is beyond the Finance and Legal Guild. And I think that's fine. And it also leaves me with okay, well, but what now? So what does that look like? Do we continue talking along these lines at the next Finance and Legal Guild, or what? So what are we doing with all of this? Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think here's my proposal for what we're doing. Roland, you make whatever grammatic changes that you've noticed. I will send it ASAP. With a suggestion, if it makes sense to meet. Are you available for our next regular guild meeting? If not, please propose some times that work for you to the lawyers. And I am already in the process of setting up the meeting with Brad. And I was planning on I think that Brad will be particularly interested in our schematic, in our diagram of how the things might go. And I will check in with him about where they are in terms of their actual legal structure. And in part, actually, I want to float the idea of the Lifeboat Academy. They're talking about next steps for the resilient communities being an outreach and engagement strategy. And I feel like we might just have that for them. I think we can kind of say, here's what we have to offer. So I think those are, in terms of the only kind of question in my mind, we haven't talked about reaching out to Joey or Steph or some of the other potential investors that we've been talking to. My feeling is that that actually can wait until we hear back from the lawyers that, yeah, this seems reasonable and the way to go forward. Actually, until we hear from the lawyers and Brad, because I am really curious if they've established what they think of as their preferred legal structure. And, that I think could be really useful. So anyhow, those I think are the concrete next steps that we need to take. Everything else I think will evolve as it evolves. So yeah, Becca, over to you. Thoughts and reactions.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were going to do another round. I do think it would be great to have some meetings in person when I'm there with Steph and Joey, and anybody else if possible. I mean, we had talked about like gathering of potential donors, and it might be too early, but I wonder if we could. What you guys think? It's totally up to you. You're the host, but like planning some potluck, or I don't know what makes sense, but to try to get something in people's calendars and then plan it after that, after it's in their calendars. I don't know. It just kind of along Heather's lines of like schedule a meeting and then see what the meeting is about when you get there. Over to Heather.
Yeah, go for it. And the other things that I'm involved in are so connected to what we're doing here is that I know that they will just unfold. And I just, the comment on about this being the financial circle, and I want to honor that. I'm just right now I'm seeing everything so connected that sometimes I'm having a hard time separating things out. And I would like to at some point really focus on finances and the way we do that differently. The default is so strong because the conventional world has the money. That like some thought about that would be really good for me to put a different frame on money. Okay, Roland.
That all sounds great. I wanted to make I have an ask. I have an ask of Becca, because you had an aha about the Lifeboat Academy, and I was wondering, and our challenge is always getting that message across. So with your aha, would you be able to, could we tap into your writing ability to be able to write something concise and short that would be able to convey your understanding of what, because what you were describing sounds like, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. So that is my ask.
I could try. I mean, I'm not sure that it was really any different from, other than that it's not just creating new groups, but working with existing ones also in a,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll jump in and say that actually is a really big thing because even just it's something that we keep coming up against and trying to communicate to people. You don't need to start something new. And we've come across it just recently. There are a few people who have written in to say that they were stepping back because they're getting involved with other groups, and we're like, but those other groups are like, why you don't need to step back. So it is in fact one of our big challenges is that people keep thinking that we're talking about starting new things, and what we're really trying to do is stitch together, be see and be part of a mutual aid or be maybe a hub of a mutual aid network or something like that, so that it doesn't matter how long the organization has been existing and how well it's going, that it can be part of helping each other be more resilient. Because ultimately, again, the village analogy, that if everyone is doing well individually, then everyone is doing well collectively.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm going to stop now.
Okay, that's more accurate. You're going to stop now. You're not done. But and I would second I think Roland has a great idea, because even though you may not feel like you're adding anything to it, you're seeing it from a different perspective, and you will communicate it in a way that someone else can hear, like you're going to be able to put it in words that resonate with other people in ways that we can't. So, this is always, it's the blind ones and the elephant, right? You're going to be able to communicate it in a way that we just can't. And it's going to be useful to someone out there. So, yeah, I love that. And yeah, I feel and Heather, I have so many thoughts on that alternative economic model and ways that we can talk it through. And one of the skills that I bring is I do business planning as well. Like I can coach people on business planning in ways that resonate more with nonprofit type thinking.
Yeah,
So,
great.
yeah. Anyhow, we are past time, and this has been, from my perspective, super productive. And so, just to close in a good way as well, just to what are you taking away with you today? What's a feeling, a thought, and what's something that you're going to carry with you into the rest of the day? So, Becca, back to you.
I think it's something about the caterpillar butterfly crystallization, and a sun could be a starfish, could be an octopus. Heather.
Yeah, possibilities. Roland.
Uh, the power of iteration. Ben.
I'm just really energized, motivated, energized, enthusiastic. So thank you, thank you, thank you. A gift I could never
Yes.
have asked for and really appreciate. So thank you all, and you'll meet again soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.